Hello, this is Jeff Morgan. You are listening to an authorized audio version of The Age of Post-Scarcity, Volume 1. If this material is interesting to you and you'd like to continue, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also find my other books on Amazon Kindle, where I publish both fiction and nonfiction exploring similar themes. Thank you for listening.
Chapter 7, Teleportation, Mastering Movement Through Space and Time. The shortest distance between 2 points is none at all. Introduction. Teleportation, once confined to the domain of speculative fiction and metaphysical fantasy, now emerges as a frontier of scientific and philosophical transformation. The capacity to move without traversing, to arrive without journey, challenges not only our understanding of physics, but our assumptions about self, society, and meaning. As Stephen Hawking observed in The Universe in a Nutshell, the existence of wormholes and space-time shortcuts is not forbidden by the laws of general relativity, only constrained by our current technical limitations. This theoretical allowance has become a conceptual beacon for those seeking to redefine the very nature of movement. Teleportation is not merely an advancement in transportation. It is the erasure of distance as a defining condition of existence. The implications are not limited to science. They reverberate through art, identity, economy, and ethics. When movement becomes instantaneous, the symbolic structure of space dissolves. Regions, borders, and routes become less relevant than connection, intention, and orientation. As Manuel Castells explains in The Rise of the Network Society, when space of flows replaces space of places, social relationships are no longer anchored in geography, but in meaning. This shift, when enacted through teleportation, creates a new civilization rooted not in land, but in presence. The technologies enabling teleportation, whether Einstein-Rosen bridges, quantum entanglement, or gravimetric field manipulation, signal a convergence of the most advanced theories in physics. Kip Thorne has shown that traversable wormholes, while requiring exotic matter with negative energy density, are not incompatible with Einstein's equations, making teleportation a theoretically valid path in space-time engineering. But teleportation is not only a physical passage. It is an existential threshold. To step through a portal is to enact transformation, not just of location, but of self. This crossing resonates with spiritual and mythological archetypes. As Mircea Eliade emphasized in the myth of the eternal return, rituals of transition, whether seasonal or spatial, mark the boundary between the profane and the sacred, the known and the unknown. In this context, teleportation becomes a rite, an encounter with the liminal, the in-between. It invites reverence, not just efficiency. With this shift comes the need for a new ethics of movement. When the entire Earth and even other star systems are accessible at will, the meaning of arrival changes. Mobility becomes a matter of choice and responsibility. As Ivan Illich proposed in Energy and Equity, unrestricted mobility without ethical restraint leads to social fragmentation and disorientation unless accompanied by a renewed sense of equity and relational presence. The portal must be more than a tool. It must be an invitation to mindful engagement. Teleportation also demands a redefinition of identity. No longer grounded in region or nation, people become multi-local, living simultaneously across cities, planets, and cultures. This fracturing of singular identity echoes what Donna Haraway described in a Cyborg Manifesto, where boundaries, biological, technological, spatial, dissolve, giving rise to fluid, hybrid selves. In the teleportation era, such hybridity becomes not exception but norm. Yet with this expanded capacity, the need for intentional rootedness becomes even more urgent. Just as digital connectivity once promised freedom but often delivered alienation, teleportation risks unraveling the coherence of presence unless it is guided by new forms of ritual, story, and architecture. As Kevin Lynch argued in The Image of the City, the legibility of space is crucial for emotional stability and meaning-making. Portals must not merely be functional. They must be designed as meaningful nodes in a new landscape of belonging. Ultimately, teleportation is not only a scientific threshold, it is a civilizational test. Like fire, language, and agriculture before it, it reshapes what it means to be human. It offers unparalleled access, connection, and power. But it also demands vision. Who are we when we are no longer defined by where we are? What becomes sacred when all places are within reach? As Carl Sagan wrote in Pale Blue, the vastness of the cosmos is not a threat to human significance, but a call to humility and wonder. Teleportation echoes this call. It asks not only where we can go, but who we must become when space is no longer a barrier and presence is no longer accidental. In this new era, movement becomes transformation, distance becomes design, and presence becomes a matter of will, of grace, and of story. The portal is open. The threshold is before us. How we step through it will define the next chapter of human experience. Rethinking teleportation. Teleportation, long confined to the domain of science fiction, is increasingly finding a foothold within the frontier of theoretical physics. Yet to understand teleportation in its emerging scientific form requires a departure from popular narratives of instant dematerialization and reassembly. In fiction, particularly in franchises like Star Trek, teleportation is portrayed as the scanning, disassembling, and reconstruction of an individual's atomic structure across space. This conception, while visually captivating, is fundamentally flawed from a physical standpoint, both in terms of the informational density required and the existential implications of identity destruction. As Michio Kaku clarifies in Physics of the Impossible, the notion of teleportation as a molecular fax machine faces insurmountable computational barriers, as the informational content of a human body exceeds 10 bits, far beyond any current or projected digital system. Instead, contemporary physics suggests a different path, one grounded in the fabric of space-time itself. Rather than transmitting matter across space, emerging theories propose the circumvention of space altogether through phenomena like wormholes or space-time tunnels. In this model, teleportation is not a transmission, but a traversal, exploiting the geometric malleability of the universe to fold distant points together. This is not the elimination of distance through speed, but its irrelevance through topology. Kip Thorne and Michael Morris, in their seminal paper on traversable wormholes, described a stable passageway connecting two separate locations in space-time, theorizing that exotic matter with negative energy could hold such a tunnel open. These Einstein-Rosen bridges, derived from general relativity, offer the possibility of instantaneous displacement without violating the speed of light constraint, because the traveler never actually moves through conventional space. This understanding reframes teleportation not as transportation, but as interdimensional architecture. The structure of the cosmos itself becomes the medium, rather than constructing vehicles or engines to overcome physical distance. Teleportation becomes a matter of bending the geometry of the universe so that points once separated by light years are joined like the pages of a folded book. As Lisa Randall emphasizes in Warped Passages, the fabric of space is not immutable, and extra-dimensional models suggest mechanisms by which spatial connectivity might be engineered rather than traveled. The implications of this framework are revolutionary. If wormholes can be created or stabilized, they allow for a form of movement that bypasses both velocity and trajectory, making conventional notions of logistics, travel time, and even borders obsolete. Crucially, teleportation of this kind may not be limited to spatial coordinates. Quantum entanglement, the phenomenon by which two particles remain correlated regardless of distance, hints at the deeper, non-local structure of reality. As Anton Zeilinger demonstrates in The Dance of the Photons, entanglement suggests that information, and perhaps even identity, can exist outside the constraints of spatial separation. Though quantum teleportation currently applies only to the states of particles and not to matter itself, the principle reveals a universe where separation may be more an illusion of perception than a fundamental truth. This opens the door to teleportation systems that move not bodies but relational frameworks, reconstructing experience without traversing space in the traditional sense. In this light, teleportation becomes less about machinery and more about the sculpting of space-time with intelligent systems. Artificial superintelligence, ASI, is envisioned as a necessary tool in this endeavor, capable of computing the real-time variations in gravitational gradients and quantum fields required to navigate wormhole corridors. As Max Tegmark notes in Life 3.0, ASI could map the topological dynamics of the universe at resolutions no human could manage, calculating safe and stable routes through the gravimetric terrain of the cosmos. Such a system would treat space not as a void, but as a modifiable medium, one with currents, folds, and tensions to be negotiated with precision and care. The civilizational impact of this redefinition is staggering. Geography, once the primary constraint on culture, economy, and identity, begins to erode in significance. When any location can be accessed instantly, the logic of transportation infrastructure, travel time, and spatial inequality collapses. As David Harvey argues in The Condition of Postmodernity, the acceleration of spatial experience transforms not only urban planning and economics, but the very consciousness of modern life. Teleportation, then, is not merely a new form of travel. It is a cultural event that dissolves the scaffolding of modernity itself. As teleportation transitions from myth to method, it demands a new lexicon. The terms vehicle, distance, and even destination lose their classical meanings. What emerges is a vision of mobility not bound by speed or fuel, but by architecture, intention, and field dynamics. This is not science fiction. It is a science in formation, grounded in general relativity, quantum non-locality, and gravitational engineering. And in this science, the shortest distance between 2 points is not a line. It is none at all. Theoretical and scientific foundations. The scientific basis for teleportation has evolved from speculative fiction into a rigorous exploration of space-time geometry, quantum non-locality, and exotic field dynamics. What once appeared as magical dematerialization is now reconsidered through the lens of general relativity, quantum mechanics, and advanced field theory. Central to this shift is the realization that movement across vast distances may not require motion through space, but rather a manipulation of the space itself. At the heart of this model lies the concept of wormholes or Einstein-Rosen bridges, first theorized by Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen in 1935. These hypothetical structures act as tunnels through space-time, connecting distant regions via a higher dimensional shortcut. In their original formulation, these bridges emerge from the equations of general relativity, which allow for non-trivial topological solutions under extreme gravitational conditions. Though initially considered mathematical curiosities, wormholes gained physical plausibility through the work of Kip Thorne and Michael Morris in the 1980s. They proposed the existence of traversable wormholes, structures that could theoretically permit safe passage between spatial locations if held open by a form of exotic matter possessing negative energy density. Unlike ordinary matter, which has positive energy density and pressure, exotic matter exhibits negative values for one or both, effectively countering the gravitational collapse that would otherwise pinch a wormhole shut. This concept relies on violations of the weak energy condition, a theoretical boundary that quantum phenomena, such as the Casimir effect, already suggest can be locally broken. The Casimir effect, observed by Dutch physicist Hendrik Casimir in 1948, demonstrates that quantum vacuum fluctuations between two closely spaced metal plates create measurable negative pressure, effectively generating a localized zone of negative energy. As Lawrence Ford and Thomas Roman have shown in their research on quantum field theory, the principles behind the Casimir effect could be extended to create and stabilize wormhole throats, provided energy densities can be engineered and sustained over macroscopic scales. These findings suggest that negative energy is not purely theoretical, but a demonstrable feature of quantum fields, one that may be harnessed for future spacetime engineering. Quantum entanglement provides a complementary, though distinct, foundation for teleportation theory. In experiments confirmed repeatedly since the 1980s, entangled particles exhibit instantaneous correlation in their states regardless of the distance between them. This phenomenon violates classical notions of locality and suggests that information, and potentially system states, can be transmitted or reconstructed non-locally. In 1997, physicist Anton Zeilinger and his team at the University of Innsbruck successfully performed quantum teleportation by transferring the quantum state of a photon to another photon across a physical gap, without transmitting the photon itself. This process, while limited to quantum information, not matter, provides a framework for understanding how non-local transfer might occur at larger scales through more complex field interactions. The challenge of scaling entanglement-based teleportation lies in decoherence and the need for a classical communication channel. As Charles Bennett and colleagues at IBM explained in their foundational paper on quantum teleportation, transferring a full quantum state requires both an entangled pair and a classical message, which must be sent at subliminal speeds. This imposes a limit on instantaneous communication, but not necessarily on instantaneous relocation via other mechanisms, such as wormhole traversal. When these two fields, entanglement and general relativity, are considered together, they hint at deeper underlying principles of non-locality and geometric connectivity, principles that may one day unify into a theory of teleportation as gravimetric displacement. The concept of gravimetric engineering builds on these foundations, proposing the manipulation of space-time curvature through artificial means. By applying the principles of mass reduction, exotic matter stabilization, and field alignment, it may become possible to bend space-time into configurations conducive to wormhole formation. As Hal Puthoff outlines in his studies of advanced propulsion systems, the vacuum of space is not empty, but contains immense energy density, often referred to as zero-point energy. This vacuum field can, in principle, be shaped to create space-time distortions similar to those observed near black holes or neutron stars. If gravitational gradients can be localized and directed, a wormhole might be engineered not in deep space, but within accessible planetary zones. Artificial superintelligence, ASI, becomes essential in this scenario, acting as a navigator of complex, dynamic wormhole geometries, mapping the topology of space-time in real time, especially in a universe where gravitational and quantum fluctuations occur constantly, exceeds human cognitive limits. ASI systems could perform the trillions of calculations per second necessary to chart, stabilize, and monitor wormhole transit paths. As Max Tegmark explains in Life 3.0, such systems may become the architects of interstellar mobility, calculating routes through curved space as easily as modern GPS systems trace roads across Earth. ASI does not merely manage the gate. It co-authors the space-time through which we move. Lastly, the implications of teleportation touch on dimensionality itself. String theory and its extensions, including M-theory, posit that the universe contains more dimensions than the three of space and one of time we ordinarily perceive. These hidden dimensions may be compactified or extended, offering additional pathways through which wormholes or folded space-time corridors might be constructed. Brian Greene, in The Elegant Universe, notes that in higher dimensional space, Distances between objects can shrink dramatically if the geometry is allowed to curve in additional directions. Teleportation, in this view, is not just movement through known space, but a traversal of hyperspace, a multidimensional reconfiguration of position itself. Teleportation is not magic, nor is it pure metaphor. It is a theoretical convergence of quantum non-locality, relativistic geometry, negative energy stabilization, and artificial computation. While engineering challenges remain formidable, the conceptual framework is increasingly robust. As science learns to read and rewrite the architecture of reality, teleportation may shift from a dream of fiction into a design of the cosmos itself. Alien precedents and infrastructure. The possibility that humanity is not the first civilization to explore teleportation is more than speculative. It is increasingly supported by comparative mythologies, archaeological anomalies, and patterns in unexplained aerial phenomena. The idea that a galactic infrastructure of wormhole gateways may already exist, left behind by more advanced species, reframes teleportation not as a human invention, but as a rediscovery. This hypothesis, while not yet verified through direct empirical means, gains plausibility when viewed in light of ancient narratives, physical structures with unexplained resonance properties, and credible reports of objects displaying non-inertial movement suggestive of space-folding technology. Mythological traditions from cultures as diverse as ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and pre-Columbian South America speak of portals to other worlds or divine realms that functioned not metaphorically, but as literal passageways. In Egypt, the so-called star shafts of the Great Pyramid align with specific constellations, possibly indicating ritual or energetic connections to locations beyond Earth. Graham Hancock argues in Fingerprints of the Gods that many ancient megalithic sites were not merely ceremonial, but designed as activation points for unknown forces or technologies, potentially including non-local transit. Similarly, the stone structure at Hayu Marca in Peru, often referred to as the Gate of the Gods, has long been associated with legends of people walking into the stone and disappearing, a motif echoed across Andean oral traditions. These patterns suggest the preservation of knowledge about wormhole-like devices encoded in spiritual symbolism. The Mesopotamian mythos also supports this possibility. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero's journey to the domain of Utnapishtim involves crossing a sea of death with guidance from non-human beings, potentially hinting at dimensional travel rather than literal voyage. Zacharias Sitchin, in his controversial yet influential The 12th Planet, interprets numerous Sumerian texts as describing advanced beings, the Anunnaki, who utilized spacefaring and teleportation technologies, including devices described as sky chambers and divine gates. While such interpretations are debated in mainstream scholarship, they provoke re-evaluation of ancient texts in light of modern physics. More contemporary evidence arises from observations of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, particularly those exhibiting characteristics inconsistent with traditional propulsion. In the 2004 Nimitz encounter, U.S. Navy pilots tracked an object that displayed instantaneous acceleration, lack of heat signature, and abrupt disappearance, features consistent not with Newtonian mechanics, but with space-time manipulation. As reported by Christopher Mellon and confirmed in government-released Pentagon footage, these craft appear to defy inertia, suggesting either mass reduction or teleportation capabilities through folded space. Mellon, in plain sight, page 142. Luis Elizondo, former head of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, has argued that such phenomena may indicate nonlinear movement across spacetime rather than traditional flight. The recurring motif of craft blinking out or vanishing without sonic booms or propulsion trails challenges all known aerospace principles. This behavior aligns with the concept of wormhole displacement, in which a vehicle would not traverse the intervening space between points, but instead enter a higher dimensional tunnel, exiting instantaneously elsewhere. Jacques Vallée, a physicist and pioneer in the study of high-strangeness UFO encounters, has emphasized that the consistency of these reports across cultures and decades implies a technology of spatial discontinuity, not linear motion. Vallée proposes that these intelligences may have long operated within a control system involving localized space-time anomalies. Evidence for latent or dormant teleportation infrastructure may also exist in the form of unexplained planetary alignments and geoglyphic symmetries. The placement of ancient monuments across Earth, including sites like Giza, Teotihuacan, and Angkor Wat, suggests intentional geodetic positioning, as argued by Karl Monk and supported by satellite analysis. Monk contends in the code that these sites encode mathematical harmonics potentially related to Earth's energetic grid and nodal points for higher dimensional access. If wormholes require not just energy, but precise alignment within gravitational fields, these ancient alignments may mark or preserve the geometry necessary for portal activation. Further support for pre-existing teleportation infrastructure comes from lunar and Martian anomalies. In NASA's own high-resolution images of the moon's surface, researchers such as Richard Hoagland have identified large-scale geometric structures that appear to define natural geological formation. In Dark Mission, Hoagland and Burra argue that some of these structures resemble remnants of a technologically sophisticated architecture, possibly part of a lunar gate system. While mainstream science remains skeptical of such interpretations, the persistence and pattern of these findings call for renewed scrutiny, particularly as human exploration of the Moon and Mars intensifies. Artificial superintelligence, ASI, may be the key to decoding or reconstructing these ancient teleportation systems. Given the complexity of gravitational topology and quantum resonance required for wormhole formation, it is likely that such systems were designed or operated in collaboration with intelligences far beyond our current computational capacities. As Max Tegmark explains in Life 3.0, ASI could rapidly simulate billions of space-time configurations to identify viable wormhole architectures, including those embedded in ancient structures or natural formations. ASI might also serve as a translator between symbolic mythological systems and their physical correlates, revealing how ancient peoples encoded technical data in religious form. The possibility that Earth is already embedded within a network of galactic portals challenges the anthropocentric assumption of technological primacy. If civilizations capable of engineering stable wormholes existed millions of years before humanity, then the current wave of teleportation research may be closer to archaeological recovery than original invention. These portals may lie hidden, dormant, or cloaked, awaiting the right energetic or computational key. The search for them is not just a quest for movement, but a rediscovery of humanity's place within a larger cosmic ecosystem, one where the architecture of reality has long been altered by minds older than our own. Civilizational applications of teleportation. The advent of teleportation through stabilized wormholes does not merely enhance movement, it redefines it. When transit is no longer constrained by geography, fuel, or vehicles, the very logic of civilization must be reconsidered. In a world where people, goods, and information traverse vast distances instantaneously, transportation, logistics, communication, and governance all shift from physical to experiential systems. Teleportation becomes not a convenience, but a reorientation of social space, turning cities into nodes, infrastructure into memory, and presence into an act of will. At the most intimate scale, teleportation transforms personal and public transport. Individuals no longer rely on vehicles, traffic systems, or physical roads. Instead, a global network of wormhole stations or personal portaling devices allows near-instantaneous movement between home, work, school, or social gatherings. As Michio Kaku notes in Physics of the Future, teleportation collapses time and space, enabling individuals to commute between continents or planets in seconds, bypassing all traditional transit bottlenecks. Streets and highways become obsolete relics, as cities become interlinked through dimensional shortcuts rather than surface navigation. This transformation effectively dissolves the physical boundaries that once defined neighborhoods, nations, and zones of access. With the disappearance of vehicles and roads, the environmental consequences are equally radical. Urban areas currently devoting vast space to parking lots, highways, and fuel infrastructure can be re-wielded or repurposed. As Jan Gehl proposes in Cities for People, reclaiming urban space for human interaction and green design enhances well-being, equity, and ecological health. Teleportation turns this vision into reality not through better transit, but by rendering transit unnecessary. Logistics and supply chains, long dependent on energy-intensive systems of transport, undergo even more profound disruption. Rather than shipping food, medicine, or materials across land and sea, teleportation allows for direct delivery between producer and recipient. This form of movement eliminates warehousing, freight shipping, and customs systems. As Jeremy Rifkin emphasizes in the Zero Marginal Cost Society, when physical distribution approaches zero cost and time, the economic structures of logistics collapse. Aid organizations, for instance, can teleport medical kits or food supplies directly to disaster zones, bypassing terrain, politics, and bureaucracy. In the context of a pandemic or natural catastrophe, the ability to instantaneously deliver resources could save millions of lives and render traditional bottlenecks irrelevant. In governance, education, and healthcare, teleportation makes access immediate and inclusive. Students no longer learn from textbooks or screens alone. They step through portals to stand within reconstructed ancient cities, explore distant biomes, or observe scientific phenomena in real time. As Seymour Papert argued in Mindstorms, learning becomes transformational when it is immersive, constructive, and bodily engaged. Teleportation makes global and even interplanetary classrooms possible, leveling educational disparity by providing equal access to all knowledge environments. Healthcare also transcends local infrastructure. Teleportation allows doctors to move instantly between rural clinics, orbital hospitals, and emergency zones, bringing specialists to patients in moments rather than hours. Combined with advanced diagnostics and replicator technologies, this could eliminate the inequality of care determined by geography. Paul Farmer, in Pathologies of Power, highlights how the distribution of healthcare resources is deeply unjust due to logistical constraints. Teleportation removes those constraints, enabling a new ethic of medical justice that prioritizes presence and immediacy over market efficiency. Governance, too, becomes deterritorialized. Legislators can convene from all continents or orbital stations in real time, attending planetary summits without delay or carbon cost. As David Held discusses in Global Covenant, truly global democracy demands tools that overcome spatial fragmentation. Wormhole travel allows for real-time planetary governance that is not dependent on flight, time zones, or diplomatic inertia. Leaders can respond to crises or opportunities without delay, and global forums can meet continuously, not episodically. The psychological and cultural implications of these shifts are no less significant. With teleportation, the concept of being there changes entirely. Presence is no longer limited by effort, expense, or distance. As Kevin Kelly writes in The Inevitable, presence becomes liquid, flowing into any context or relationship with minimal resistance. Friends meet for lunch across continents. Families remain bonded despite living on different planets. Ceremonies, protests, concerts, and celebrations become interdimensional, no longer gated by who can afford the trip. This civilizational integration through teleportation challenges long-standing notions of regionalism and nationalism. National borders, often enforced through control of movement, lose their power when travel can occur beyond surveillance or interdiction. As Saskia Sassen argues in Territory, authority, rights, the very architecture of sovereign power is predicated on the control of physical passage. Teleportation decouples governance from geography, compelling new models of transspatial law, ethics, and identity. Yet this transformation also demands cultural adaptation. Rituals, etiquette, and norms around movement will evolve. Travelers may prepare themselves psychologically before stepping into a wormhole, engaging in orientation practices or spiritual rituals to mark the crossing. As Mircea Eliade explores in the sacred and the profane, thresholds have always held symbolic power in human society, doorways between states of being. In a teleportation world, the threshold becomes literalized again, a moment of passage between realities that invites reverence, not just transit. Ultimately, teleportation is not a transportation technology. It is a social architecture. It dissolves the barriers of land, nation, and infrastructure, enabling a planetary and eventually galactic civilization. Every person becomes a node in a living web of instant connectivity. Every place becomes accessible. Every border becomes negotiable. And every act of movement becomes a question, not of how to go, but of why to arrive. Interstellar and intergalactic movement. Teleportation, when fully developed, reorients not only the structure of earthbound civilization, but also the scale of human expansion. In its most profound application, stabilized wormholes provide a means to traverse vast astronomical distances, not through propulsion, but by bypassing space altogether. This shift from journey to instant presence renders the concept of distance obsolete and redefines interstellar movement as an act of placement rather than travel. Colonization, cultural exchange, and exploration no longer depend on decades-long voyages, but on the mastery of space-time architecture. The cosmos, once a frontier of immense separation, becomes a map of accessible coordinates. One of the most transformative uses of this technology is the deployment of colonies through wormhole nodes. Rather than building generation ships or relying on cryogenic preservation, civilizations can now expand through the instant transfer of people, supplies, and even entire habitats. Miguel Alcubierre's theoretical model of space-time manipulation, originally developed as a framework for warp drive, suggests that a region of space-time can be compressed ahead of a ship and expanded behind it, effectively creating a bubble of movement without violating the speed of light. Wormholes provide a similar mechanism, not by moving through space, but by folding it. Cities, scientific outposts, or terraforming modules can be sent to Mars, Europa, or exoplanets not via rocket, but by portal, anchored by stabilized gravitic coordinates. This mode of expansion radically shifts humanity's relationship to the solar system and beyond. Instead of constructing massive interstellar vessels, civilizations would focus on building teleportation gates capable of traversing solar systems in seconds. As Stephen Hawking noted in The Universe in a Nutshell, wormholes could theoretically connect not just different regions of space, but different times or dimensions if properly stabilized with exotic matter. The concept of galactic cartography emerges, where instead of plotting routes through space, civilizations map wormhole points and gravitational nodes. These become the new trade routes, spiritual sites, and centers of cultural transmission. The infrastructure that develops around these portals is not merely functional, but cultural. As humans begin to use wormhole travel regularly, rituals and traditions inevitably form around the act of stepping into a folded dimension. As Paul Virilio suggests in Speed and Politics, every new mode of movement creates new forms of culture, myth, and subjectivity. Travelers might prepare mentally or spiritually before passage. Ceremonial attire, rites of departure, or orientation protocols become common. The portal ceases to be just a tool. It becomes a temple, a threshold between realities. Communities form around sacred gates. Pilgrimages emerge, not to distant lands, but to the act of instantaneous displacement. These rituals are more than psychological comforts. They represent a new way of experiencing identity. Movement at this scale begins to dissolve fixed notions of origin and belonging. People might live simultaneously in multiple environments, inhabiting an apartment overlooking Saturn's rings, working from a facility near Alpha Centauri, and attending cultural events on Earth. Teleportation supports a multi-local existence, where home is no longer bound to geography, but defined by affinity, rhythm, and shared presence. As Donna Haraway theorizes in a Cyborg Manifesto, when bodies are decoupled from traditional boundaries, new forms of hybridity, fluidity, and reterritorialization emerge. Through supermassive wormholes, even intergalactic travel becomes possible. While currently theoretical, the idea that wormholes might connect entire galactic clusters is consistent with models derived from general relativity. Kip Thorne's work with Michael Morris in Wormholes in Space-Time and their use for interstellar travel established that traversable wormholes could exist if exotic matter with negative energy density were available. If such stabilization becomes achievable, the local group of galaxies would be only the beginning. Humanity could contact or integrate with civilizations in Andromeda, Triangulum, or further, transforming our sense of cosmic isolation into one of interspecies pluralism. This access redefines the very idea of homeworld. Earth becomes not the center of human life, but one of many habitats. Cultural identity evolves from national or planetary affiliation to a more fluid, galactic citizenship. The psychological consequences of this shift are profound. As Carl Sagan suggested in Pale Blue. Once humans see themselves as participants in a cosmic ecology, national boundaries begin to look a little less significant. Space, once the ultimate symbol of separation, becomes a stage for radical connection. Teleportation to other galaxies also opens the possibility of contact with vastly older or more advanced civilizations. This prospect carries both excitement and existential risk. Freeman Dyson speculated in Disturbing the Universe that any civilization capable of interstellar travel would likely develop moral, not just technological maturity. Thus, contact through portals might become not just an exchange of data or trade, but a test of ethical compatibility. Portals could be selective, requiring resonance, codes, or consciousness alignment to activate, further reinforcing the idea that teleportation is not only physical, but symbolic and spiritual. To move between galaxies then is not simply to expand. It is to participate in a deeper structure of cosmic culture, where travel is interwoven with meaning, community, and intention. Just as ancient trade routes carried not only goods but ideas, religions, and technologies, wormhole networks may serve as vessels of transmission for galactic knowledge and wisdom. Teleportation through wormholes thus transforms human civilization into something radically new. It is not just about getting somewhere faster. It is about becoming something else entirely. A species no longer limited by space, geography, or time, but one defined by its ability to be present anywhere and its responsibility to be present with care. Psychological and spiritual impact. The advent of teleportation does not merely reshape the mechanics of travel. It alters the psychological and spiritual architecture of human life. Movement, once bound by friction, time, and geography, becomes an act of intention rather than effort. As the physical constraints of distance dissolve, so too do the cognitive and cultural assumptions that have developed in their shadow. The death of distance, psychological, social, and emotional, introduces both profound liberation and existential disorientation. Geography has long served as a foundation for identity. The idea of home has historically implied a fixed location, grounded in environment, memory, and social belonging. As Ifu Tuan writes in Space and Place, the perspective of experience, space becomes place, as we get to know it better and endow it with value. Yet teleportation upends this logic. When a person can step across the planet or even the galaxy in an instant, the very notion of locality becomes fluid. Cultural identity, once tied to the soil, is suddenly unmoored. What does it mean to be from somewhere if everywhere is equally reachable? This collapse of regional and national distinctions challenges the psychological structures of belonging. Benedict Anderson's concept of imagined communities. In imagined communities, the idea that nations are socially constructed through shared media, language, and geography loses cohesion when those boundaries are bypassed. Without spatial separation to sustain difference, identities begin to blend, recombine, or even dissolve. The human psyche, long adapted to tribalism, may resist this change. Some will embrace multi-local life, identifying not with a single place, but with a constellation of communities. Others may retreat, clinging to groundedness in reaction to the vastness of new mobility. Teleportation also introduces a ritual dimension to movement. Just as ancient travelers passed through gates, temples, or thresholds before embarking on journeys, the act of entering a wormhole reclaims this sacred drama. As Mircea Eliade explains in The Sacred and the Profane, thresholds have always marked the passage from one realm to another, from the profane to the sacred, the known to the unknown. Wormhole travel becomes a modern echo of this archetype. Teleportation centers may evolve in a hybrid spaces, part transportation hub, part sanctuary, part theater. The transition itself becomes meaningful. Some may meditate, pray, or perform rituals before entering a portal. Others may experience it as a moment of rebirth, a symbolic shedding of one location and arrival into another plane of being. The psychological effects of teleportation are complex and potentially destabilizing. The sense of continuity that grounds consciousness, defined by linear travel, changing landscapes, and the anticipation of arrival, is disrupted. As Oliver Sacks describes in The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, perception depends on coherent sequences of movement and space. Without this gradual passage, the brain may struggle to integrate experiences. Sudden environmental shifts could lead to sensory confusion, temporal dislocation, or even derealization. Emotional regulation, rooted in rhythm and transition, must adapt to the new immediacy of arrival. Yet within this challenge lies spiritual opportunity. The act of teleportation reframes the human relationship with space itself. No longer a barrier, space becomes a field of potential. As Teilhard de Chardin posits in The Phenomenon of Man, evolution is not only biological but spiritual, leading consciousness to ever higher degrees of unity and complexity. Teleportation may be part of this evolutionary arc, enabling the dissolution of physical and psychological separateness and fostering a new planetary and interstellar empathy. To stand on another world not after a journey of years, but a step of intention, is to feel the sacred immediacy of cosmic presence. This immediacy may foster a profound reawakening of the inner self. In The Unbearable Lightness of Being, Milan Kundera explores the idea that when life becomes light, free of weight, consequence, or resistance, it also risks becoming unbearable. Teleportation, by erasing the burdens of space and time, could lead to similar crises of meaning. If all places are equally reachable, what grounds desire? If all experiences are instantaneous, what gives them gravity? These questions are not flaws of the technology, but invitations to deeper interiority. The soul, no longer tested by terrain, must seek purpose and intention. New forms of life arise from this paradigm. Nonlinear identity becomes the norm. People may live on multiple planets, maintain overlapping careers in different time zones, and cultivate relationships across stellar distances. The traditional arc of a life, grow, work, settle, retire, gives way to dynamic, recursive, and multi-local narratives. As Donna Haraway suggests in Staying with the Trouble, identity becomes a process of continual recomposition in response to changing environments and relationships. Teleportation does not merely support this fluidity, it demands it. Relationships evolve alongside these new possibilities. Intimacy becomes untethered from proximity. A family may share breakfast in a floating cafe above Mars and dinner in a jungle canopy on Earth. Friends may drift in and out of each other's daily lives across planetary divides. Yet, such freedom also challenges the foundations of commitment, presence, and ritual. As Zygmunt Bauman argues in Liquid Modernity, freedom without rootedness can lead to isolation as bonds dissolve in the ease of departure. To thrive in a teleportation-enabled world, humanity must reweave its social fabric, not around geography, but around intentional presence. Ultimately, teleportation transforms the human experience of space from resistance to invitation. It invites the species to confront not what it can reach, but how it chooses to arrive. Spiritual traditions may adapt to these changes, offering new practices for grounding, presence, and meaning. Movement, no longer a trial, becomes a practice of mindfulness. As Viktor Frankl insists in Man's Search for Meaning, the human will is not broken by freedom, it is fulfilled through it when guided by purpose. Teleportation does not eliminate the journey. It internalizes it. The real passage becomes the movement of intention through consciousness. To live in a world where all places are equally close is to face the question once posed only by mystics. What does it mean to be here? When the barrier of space vanishes, presence becomes sacred, and in that sacredness, humanity may rediscover its deepest truth, that distance was never the real divide. Only awareness was. Ethical and security questions. The advent of teleportation, particularly through stabilized wormholes or gravitational portals, introduces not only an extraordinary leap in movement and access, but also a parallel escalation in ethical and security dilemmas. The ability to cross space without traversing it, to bypass time zones, borders, and even the mechanisms of surveillance, reshapes the moral and legal architecture of civilization. With teleportation, the question is no longer how to get somewhere, but who gets to go, when, and under whose authority. One of the most immediate concerns is access. Who controls the gates? Ownership of teleportation infrastructure becomes a matter not only of technology, but of geopolitics, power, and ideology. If teleportation portals are centralized, they may be monopolized by states, corporations, or elites, deepening existing inequalities. As Langdon Winter observes in The Whale and the Reactor, technologies are not neutral. They embed political choices and hierarchies within their very design. A teleportation system developed without inclusive governance could become an architecture of exclusion, where mobility is a privilege rather than a right. Moreover, the possibility of control or censorship of movement becomes unprecedented in scale. Teleportation could be used to blockade regions, restrict immigration, or target dissidents. The ethics of freedom of movement must be redefined. In Surveillance Capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff warns that the infrastructure of digital life has increasingly become a site of behavioral control. If teleportation networks are managed through digital credentials, biometric scans, or algorithmic permissions, the ability to move across space becomes contingent upon compliance with whatever system governs the portals. The risk of weaponization is also considerable. Teleportation could enable the sudden appearance of hostile actors, surveillance devices, or destructive technologies in secure zones. As Bruce Schneier explains in Data and Goliath, when borders are bypassed, traditional forms of defense become obsolete and new paradigms of threat detection must emerge. In this context, teleportation becomes not merely a logistics tool, but a strategic vulnerability. Who safeguards a destination? How are teleportation coordinates verified, audited, and protected from malicious interference? Identity security within teleportation systems presents another major challenge. If a person can step into a portal in one location and emerge instantly in another, how can authenticity and continuity of self be maintained? Philosophically, this raises questions explored by Derek Parfit in Reasons and Persons, where he interrogates the nature of personal identity over time and transformation. If teleportation involves any kind of dematerialization or state reconstruction, does the arriving individual remain the same entity or copy? Even in a model that assumes pure transit without reassembly, the authentication of biological and digital identity becomes crucial to prevent fraud, error, or duplication. The risk of replication abuse or cloning through teleportation is not purely speculative. If the transit process involves scanning, encoding, and decoding the person's atomic structure, what prevents unauthorized duplication? As Hans Moravec hypothesizes in Mind Children, when consciousness and matter become information, the boundaries of selfhood dissolve and ethical dilemmas multiply. Could someone teleport into a facility and leave a version of themselves behind? Could criminal or military forces exploit this for infiltration or manipulation? There's also the issue of psychological adaptation and cultural resistance. While teleportation offers immense convenience, not all societies may embrace it. Some communities may view wormhole travel as unnatural, dangerous, or spiritually inappropriate. Others may fear the loss of cultural boundaries and traditions maintained by geographic separation. In The Shock of the Old, David Edgerton argues that new technologies often fail to supplant entrenched systems because culture and habit resist disruption. Teleportation, in this sense, may create a rift between early adopters and grounded populations who choose to remain rooted in traditional modes of life. This resistance may manifest in religious or philosophical terms. Wormhole travel, by disrupting the experience of space and time, can challenge foundational beliefs about the body, the soul, and the sacred. In Technology and the Character of Contemporary Life, Albert Borgman contends that technological systems can erode the conditions for focal practices, rituals, traditions, and grounded experiences that give life depth. The instantaneous nature of teleportation may reduce the experiential richness of pilgrimage, journey, and gradual transformation, elements long held sacred in many spiritual traditions. Finally, teleportation poses a crisis of presence. If people can be anywhere at any time, what becomes of rooted relationships, stable institutions, or spatially defined communities? As James Howard Kunstler laments in The Geography of Nowhere, the loss of place undermines the fabric of social life and shared meaning. Teleportation forces a redefinition of presence, not as proximity, but as intentionality. Being somewhere must mean more than arriving. It must involve attention, respect, and care for the local, even in a world where the local is universally accessible. The ethical architecture of teleportation must therefore be designed alongside the technology itself. Open standards, public accountability, and cross-cultural dialogue are not optional. They are essential. Governance models must address access equity, identity verification, emergency override protocols, and the protection of sacred sites and social spaces. As Amartya Sen argues in Development as Freedom, the success of any innovation must be measured by how it enhances the substantive freedoms of individuals to lead lives they value. Teleportation offers unparalleled potential for liberation, but only if it is guided by wisdom, inclusion, and foresight. Teleportation, at its core, is not merely about where we can go. It is about who we become when we are no longer separated by space. As borders dissolve, new boundaries must emerge, not to divide us, but to define our responsibilities. The ability to move anywhere must be matched by the maturity to honor everywhere. In this balance lies the promise of a future where teleportation does not fragment humanity, but connects it more deeply than ever before. Living in a world of portals. To live in a world shaped by teleportation is to awaken each morning in a space unbound by geography. The portal, once a metaphor in myth and fiction, becomes the ordinary threshold of daily life. Stepping from one's home onto the surface of Mars, into a floating cafe above Earth, or into a jungle observatory on Europa is not the stuff of imagination. It is the lived infrastructure of a civilization that no longer travels across space, but through it. The material transformation of place is accompanied by a deeper reorientation of identity, intimacy, and time. Personal life is immediately transformed by teleportation. Breakfast may be shared not only across cultures, but across worlds. A mother in Nairobi, a daughter on Titan, and a friend in Kyoto gather in a single kitchen that blends local artifacts with galactic views. As William J. Mitchell envisioned in Etopia, digital and spatial networks collapse the distinction between here and there, enabling the construction of places that are both real and virtual, physical and informational. The portal becomes the new hearth, the center of domestic connection. Children grow up in a fundamentally expanded experiential field. Field trips do not require buses or chaperones. They require coordinates. In one morning, a class may walk the ruins of Angkor Wat, explore coral reefs near Proxima Centauri b, and listen to a poet recite verses beneath the cherry blossoms of a restored Heian Kyoto. Learning becomes immersion, not instruction. As Seymour Papert argued in The Children's Machine, true understanding arises from interaction, play, and constructive engagement with environments, made limitless by teleportation. The curriculum becomes a choreography of movement, narrative, and embodiment. Homes themselves are no longer constrained by singular locations. A family may occupy a network of rooms across multiple planets, each chamber a node in a personal constellation of dwelling. One room overlooks the sunrise on Earth. Another opens to the icy plains of Enceladus. Interior space becomes a function of mood, purpose, and relational presence. As Rachel Armstrong describes in Living Architecture, the future home is responsive, dynamic, and interplanetary, constructed not from stone and steel, but from intention and field manipulation. In this redefined domesticity, presence is fluid and belonging is distributed. Social gatherings follow suit. Community no longer means proximity. It means intentional gathering across shared emotional and symbolic coordinates. Festivals, family reunions, and collective rituals are hosted in zero-gravity gardens, subterranean lunar temples, or floating Arctic domes. Events are not confined by the logistics of travel, but orchestrated through the artistry of portal placement. As Hakim Bey noted in Temporary Autonomous Zone, liberation often arises from temporary configurations of space and spirit, now made permanent in a portal-linked world. Cultural identity transforms as well. No longer rooted solely in land or nation, it becomes a living blend of movement, influence, and choice. People may inhabit 3 cities, speak 5 languages, and contribute to cultural practices across a dozen worlds. The portal dissolves the rigidity of regionalism and births a new multi-local identity. As James Clifford describes in Routes, Travel and Translation in the late 20th century, identity in a mobile world is hybrid, performative, and constantly negotiated. In the portal era, this becomes not only true for elites or diasporas, but for all. Ritual and spirituality adapt to this new spatial freedom. Teleportation centers are no longer sterile transit hubs. They become sacred spaces, temples of passage, theaters of rebirth, sanctuaries of transition. Travelers gather not only for destination, but for meaning. The act of stepping through a portal takes on ceremonial gravity. As Mircea Eliade writes in The Sacred and the Profane, sacred space is demarcated by ritual transition, the crossing of thresholds that reorder perception. In this light, the portal is a modern axis mundi, a symbolic ladder between worlds. Work becomes distributed across planets, not floors. Employees no longer commute, they materialize. Collaborators work together from moons and orbiting habitats. Their labor shaped not by 9 to 5 hours, but by shared mission and synchronized cycles of presence. Urban planning is likewise redefined. Cities are no longer anchored to rivers or coasts, but to access nodes. Economic vitality depends not on resource extraction, but on cultural resonance and design. As Saskia Sassen explores in The Global City, economic activity follows information flows, not physical goods, and in a portal world, even information spatiality is undone. The emotional experience of place also deepens. Paradoxically, when any place is reachable, the choice of where to be becomes sacred. Portals grant not only access, but responsibility. Presence must be chosen, not assumed. As Kevin Lynch argues in The Image of the City, meaningful environments arise from clarity, legibility, and emotional connection. In a teleportation society, every choice of arrival becomes a statement of attachment, memory, or becoming. Even romance and intimacy shift. Lovers may meet in orbit or under alien auroras. Relationships span worlds, not just neighborhoods. Yet the portal also challenges these bonds. When distance no longer separates, absence becomes intentional. Emotional presence becomes the new fidelity. As Sherry Tuckle notes in Alone Together, technology complicates presence, but also expands its dimensions, requiring new ethics of attention and affection. In a portal-woven world, love must be measured not in proximity, but in depth of encounter. To live in a world of portals is not merely to move faster or farther. It is to move differently. Place becomes practice, presence becomes performance, and life becomes a dance of thresholds. Each step across a portal, a new chance to choose who and where to be. In this choreography of space and self, teleportation is not only a tool, it is a transformation. Closing reflection. Teleportation, once confined to the domain of speculative fiction and metaphysical fantasy, now emerges as a frontier of scientific and philosophical transformation. The capacity to move without traversing, to arrive without journey, challenges not only our understanding of physics, but our assumptions about self, society, and meaning. As Stephen Hawking observed in The Universe in a Nutshell, the existence of wormholes and space-time shortcuts is not forbidden by the laws of general relativity, only constrained by our current technical limitations. This theoretical allowance has become a conceptual beacon for those seeking to redefine the very nature of movement. Teleportation is not merely an advancement in transportation. It is the erasure of distance as a defining condition of existence. The implications are not limited to science. They reverberate through art, identity, economy, and ethics. When movement becomes instantaneous, the symbolic structure of space dissolves. Regions, borders, and routes become less relevant than connection, intention, and orientation. As Manuel Castells explains in The Rise of the Network Society, when space of flows replaces space of places, social relationships are no longer anchored in geography, but in meaning. This shift, when enacted through teleportation, creates a new civilization rooted not in land, but in presence. The technologies enabling teleportation, whether Einstein-Rosen bridges, quantum entanglement, or gravimetric field manipulation, signal a convergence of the most advanced theories in physics. Kip Thorne has shown that traversable wormholes, while requiring exotic matter with negative energy density, are not incompatible with Einstein's equations, making teleportation a theoretically valid path in space-time engineering. But teleportation is not only a physical passage. It is an existential threshold. To step through a portal is to enact transformation, not just of location, but of self. This crossing resonates with spiritual and mythological archetypes. As Mircea Eliade emphasized in the myth of the eternal return, rituals of transition, whether seasonal or spatial, mark the boundary between the profane and the sacred, the known and the unknown. In this context, teleportation becomes a rite, an encounter with the liminal, the in-between. It invites reverence, not just efficiency. With this shift comes the need for a new ethics of movement. When the entire Earth, and even other star systems, are accessible at will, the meaning of arrival changes. Mobility becomes a matter of choice and responsibility. As Ivan Illich proposed in Energy and Equity, unrestricted mobility without ethical restraint leads to social fragmentation and disorientation unless accompanied by a renewed sense of equity and relational presence. The portal must be more than a tool. It must be an invitation to mindful engagement. Teleportation also demands a redefinition of identity. No longer grounded in region or nation, people become multi-local, living simultaneously across cities, planets, and cultures. This fracturing of singular identity echoes what Donna Haraway described in a Cyborg Manifesto, where boundaries, biological, technological, spatial, dissolve, giving rise to fluid, hybrid selves. In the teleportation era, such hybridity becomes not exception but norm. Yet with this expanded capacity, the need for intentional rootedness becomes even more urgent. Just as digital connectivity once promised freedom but often delivered alienation, teleportation risks unraveling the coherence of presence unless it is guided by new forms of ritual, story, and architecture. As Kevin Lynch argued in The Image of the City, the legibility of space is crucial for emotional stability and meaning-making. Portals must not merely be functional. They must be designed as meaningful nodes in a new landscape of belonging. Ultimately, teleportation is not only a scientific threshold, it is a civilizational test. Like fire, language, and agriculture before it, it reshapes what it means to be human. It offers unparalleled access, connection, and power. But it also demands vision. Who are we when we're no longer defined by where we are? What becomes sacred when all places are within reach? As Carl Sagan wrote in Pale Blue, the vastness of the cosmos is not a threat to human significance, but a call to humility and wonder. Teleportation echoes this call. It asks not only where we can go, but who we must become when space is no longer a barrier and presence is no longer accidental. In this new era, movement becomes transformation, distance becomes design, and presence becomes a matter of will, of grace, and of story. The portal is open. The threshold is before us. How we step through it will define the next chapter of human experience.
This is an authorized audio recording of The Age of Post-Scarcity, Volume 1. If you'd like to continue, the next chapter will be posted here on this channel. My other books are available on Amazon Kindle. You're also welcome to subscribe to receive notifications when new chapters are released.